whichever. So here was the question. It doesn't really matter, but here was the question by email from Brad. It says, in talking to my friends about the libertarian ballot, I've come across an argument that I don't know how to defend. What is Joe's and the party's response to government regulation of business? I'm thinking here about occupational safety and health admin, Food and Drug Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, etc. My friends and I agree on the spirit of those organizations. Society benefits from efforts and even requirements on industry to help us work, eat, and live safer. Simply aligning the market is one thing, but then isn't there room for Ford Motors to just decide it's cheaper to settle Pinto crash lawsuits than recall the problem? Didn't we establish OSHA out of an effort to make working in America safer? I've read ideas about creating private certifying organizations, but doesn't that just put us back in the same boat? That's a fantastic question, Brad.
That's a great question.
That is a really good question, and it's one.
I will say that real quick before you answer that question. Most of the questions that I get by email are not good questions. Most of those go immediately into
the not good question folder.
I am deleting this entire thread because what are you on asking that? Because that's not even any. But that was a
good one,
well-written email.
Yeah.
So thank you, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you for a good email, Brad. And folks, you too can send a not terrible email to Muddied Waters of Freedom at, is that the? No, it's just Muddy Waters of Freedom at gmail.com. Please just leave a good one. Because we get some.
I read every one of them. And some of the stuff that has been said to me, not knowing it's me, of course, that comes through, it makes me weep.
You're just hurting Matt.
Weep.
Stop hurting my co-host and heterosexual life partner, please. Please. Hashtag stop hurting Matt. Please. So, Brad, this is a fantastic question. It speaks to a lot of concerns that even some libertarians have, which is if government is not regulating things, then how will the market be able to provide? We have to look at the fact that these were originally created from market demand. The market demanded that changes be made, and changes started being made when labor unions were first organizing. It was to collectivize and grow and solidify and unify the organizing and bargaining power of labor to be able to agitate for better conditions. And eventually the government realized that this was something they could get on for themselves. So they created these agencies that were supposedly set up to protect us. But we see what they've done. All of these agencies, health and safety and environmental and everything else, they serve some roles. And here are what those roles are. They create legislation, they create regulations, which they both create legislation and executive regulations, agency-based regulations that largely make it impossible for small and medium businesses to compete. They make it increasingly difficult and sometimes impossible for smaller, more disruptive and innovative and dynamic companies to compete because they can't afford the initial cost of compliance to be able to even grow in the first place. These regulations just so happen to be written by crony lobbyists who make their way into these agencies that are crony lobbyists for the big companies who, coincidentally enough, happen to have a vested interest in smaller competitors not being able to rise up and threaten their market share. So that's one thing they do. The next thing they do is that when the large companies inevitably abuse those regulations, so if we're talking environmental, they leak, they spill, they dump, they do whatever to harm the environment, or if we're talking health and safety, they infringe upon the health and safety concerns of their workers, they get protected against lawsuits. They get indemnified against actual lawsuits, or they get shuttled into these federally run class actions that often give little money to the actual workers and give most of it to the attorneys and the government. Yay, government. And then the other thing they do is they externalize the cost of cleanup and damage to you, the taxpayer, who often were also the one who was hurt by the thing that happened. So that's what happens when you put powerful people in charge of protecting you against their friends, the powerful people who bought and paid for them to be in office. So your secondary question, how does the free market handle it? It's very simple. If you get government out of it and you allow for a truly undisrupted, uncoercive free market, when a company is a bad actor, not only will they be ripped to shreds by various lawsuits and actions against them, but also by removing those barriers and burdens that are put in place to stop their smaller competitors to rising up, their smaller competitors will rise up. People will say, I don't want to buy Pintos that explode. I want to buy this new car that doesn't explode. Yay, cars that don't explode. And then they will say, I don't want to buy cereal from this company that uses slave labor to pound their oats or whatever. I want to buy cereal from this other company that treats their employees well. Yay, not slavery flakes. So this is how the market fixes it. Yes, private certification agencies also have a role as well. If there is a private organization that says in order for you to have our official good cornflakes or cars that don't blow up mark of approval, you have to demonstrate these various things, and we will come in and you have to pay a fee for us to demonstrate that you're complying. And then people will see that mark and go, hey, this is one of those cars that doesn't blow up because it's been approved by the National Association of People who make cars that don't blow up. And or hey, these cornflakes aren't made by chattel slaves because this came from the international consortium of people who don't make slaves pound their oats, and so or the cornflakes or whatever. And so that's how you can do that. Is it perfect? No system is perfect. Does it remove the cronyism? Yeah. Because it puts you in charge. It takes the power and the wealth out of the hands and the decision-making out of the hands of the craven pandering politicians, the bureaucratic state they've created, which is funneled by the bureaucratic, by the well-heeled, politically connected billionaire cronies that have bought and paid for them to be in office, and it puts that power and that wealth and that decision-making ability back in your hand as the consumer, where it always should have belonged. So that is the answer to that. And it was a great question.
It was a great question. Real quick, I want to pull it back up. I'm just pulling it up on my phone here, where he said,
damn slavery flakes took our gerbs. That's correct.
Where did he say it?
Not slavery flakes, breakfast of champions. These comments are just...
Yeah. Isn't there room for Ford Motors to just decide it's cheaper to settle Pinto crash lawsuits than recall the problem? Yeah. So here's the thing. That's what they do now. They figure out what the cost of lawsuits would be averaged out, and then they figure out what the cost of a recall is.
And when the government indemnifies them against damage, that cost of lawsuits goes down. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. The cost of recall, if the cost of recall is higher than the cost of the lawsuits, they will go with the lawsuits. They already do this. This isn't new. This isn't something that would happen if. This is already happening. And what Spike said about the guy.
Go ahead.
What Spike said about the government indemnifying them is also correct. So a lot of the problems that you think are going to happen if we get rid of these things are already going on.
Exactly. Often when people say, but without government, who would protect us against the things that are happening right now, with government supposedly protecting us against them? And these things are said often without a tremendous amount of irony. Then that's okay.
Exactly.
That's okay. We still love them, but is what's happening. So the bottom line is that, and also we focus on the lawsuits. There's also just the fact that when you remove all of those barriers and burdens, there can be more actors in that sector. You can have more providers. So again, it's not just I can sue them when my Pinto explodes. It's I'm going to go buy, instead of a Pinto, I'm going to buy a Lima. Bean. I'm gonna go buy a non-explodey car from the non-explodey car corp.
I'm gonna go buy a refried.
A refried. Ooh, actually, now I'm hungry. I'm gonna go buy a Great Northern White, which which doesn't explode. I'm getting punchy. I'm going to go buy a car that doesn't explode. And there are many more cars that are being provided, and so many of them don't explode now because the government isn't protecting the splody car makers. So that's really how that works. Is it perfect? No. Will there never be cars that don't explode, or never be cars that explode again? No, that's not how any of this works. But will it greatly reduce the amount of abuse that's happening by taking the power out of the hands of the powerful and putting it back in your hands where it belonged, decentralizing things at the community level? Absolutely. Yeah, no, it absolutely will.